Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of An Infidel Reads the Quran. Today we're talking about Surah 7, and I have Nadir as last week, Bogi as always, and new one here is Ghada. And Ghada did, okay, check your name, make sure that that's the one you, okay, good.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. So, everybody, Ghada, since you're newest, would you give an introduction for yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. I'm Ghada. I'm from Saudi Arabia originally. I was born and raised there. I grew up as a Shia Muslim in the Eastern Province, and a few years ago, I escaped Saudi, and now I live here in America.
Outstanding, outstanding. And Nadir, as before, what was your the way how would you self-describe, sir?
Yeah, so basically, I'm a Muslim living here in Florida. I'm involved in many Islamic outreach activities, like to prisons and to different colleges. And I've been studying Quran and science and the miracles of the Quran for about the last 10, 15 years, and have had many debates and discussions on that as well.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get started. Bogi, you have some notes on Surah 7.
Hey, Aaron, I just joined as well.
Oh, yes.
Check that.
Hi,
Okay,
Mohsin.
Mohsin, welcome back. Welcome back.
Yes. So I do have notes as always because being diligent and stuff. Besides, I don't want to miss out on Hellfire. It sounds so much fun. So my first note is, Surah 7 is our first Whopper size because we're doing it chronologically. This is the first one that's above 100 verses, and it's actually 200 verses.
Yeah,
Long
this was
Yes.
insufferably long.
Yes, I took more than 8 hours to just chew through the whole thing.
And I listened to it this morning, and it was 40 minutes long, 48 minutes long.
I'm not surprised, especially if it's read nice and slow. So my general note here is that Surah 7 has 2 abrogations because we just move on from that point on. My standing note on abrogation, Aaron, before you ask me, is abrogation is when a verse is superseded by another verse, allowing it in the chronological or following it in the chronological order. The superseding verse completely replaces the superseded verse, thus rendering it moot. In Arabic, al-nasikh, abrogation, and nasikh is the superseding verse, and mansukh is the verse that has had its time and it's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what else is here to be said? So generally, later verses abrogate earlier verses because that's how a chronological order can work. And I attached a couple of links to find the abrogation lists and the chronological orders into the notes, just for general use. Okay, the verses that are being abrogated in Surah 7, just to get this out of the way, is 183 and 199. It's pretty down the line.
Okay, are we starting all the way at the end then, or?
Yeah, there are 2 verses in the end that are being abrogated. And of course, 183 says, and I grant them respite, surely my scheme is effective. AKA when the unbelievers unbelieve and oppose you, God will grant them a bit of time, a respite, and He will deal with them later. Now that's being abrogated by 9.5, which is no respite for you. You're getting,
All right.
199. Take to forgiveness and join a good and turn aside from ignorant fight and from the ignorant. And this is also abrogated by 9.5, which is after the forbidden months have passed, then slay them wherever you find them.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
just get these.
Can I
Now,
respond to that, or?
yes, go ahead, Nadir.
Okay, so we're back on this again. Didn't you try to pull this one last week or whenever we
Yes,
talked
I
about it?
did.
He,
And
he
I'll
didn't.
keep
It's not
pulling
that
it
he's
up
trying
every
to pull
time.
something. He's
Okay.
pointing out whenever abrogations happen.
Okay.
I also, I mean, even, sorry, Nadir, but I'm actually agreeing with you that I do not believe that that was the abrogated verse.
Mhm.
Toba was a very distinct surah because it didn't even start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It just starts with God's anger. And it was due because of certain things that were happening at that time, and not because this is now going to be the textbook that we use whenever we are going out in jihad. I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that. That's just what I believe.
Well,
Okay.
let me share with you what I see going on over here, okay?
Mhm.
So when you talk about abrogation, first of all, this is a layer of interpretation being imposed upon the text, rightly or wrongly. I'm not disputing that, but that is an interpretation. Now,
Okay.
let me just finish what I'm saying.
Okay, go ahead.
So now you come and you are coming and you are interpreting what abrogation is. So what we're dealing with here is not even an interpretation of Islam. We're dealing with an interpretation of Islam. So, so what I'm trying to explain to you, Mr. Baraz, is your interpretation of the interpretation of abrogation of the verse is, I think, a little bit misleading. Well,
Okay.
first, okay, so
Okay, I'm not trying to mislead
a
anybody.
9.5 abrogates really nothing. Okay, that was somebody wrote that in a commentary. All right, in Ibn Kathir, and then from there you took that and you spun it off to be something like, okay, well, all the peaceful verses are no longer acceptable or doable now. Is that what you're understanding there, Mr. Boraz?
Here's the point. You're a
Is that
Muslim.
what you believe?
You're a Muslim, right?
Yes.
Yes. You do not drink alcohol. You do not drink alcohol before a prayer. So you never go to the mosque drunk. But you also do not drink alcohol between the prayers, and you do not drink alcohol at night before going home. Do you know why these restrictions are?
It gradually reduces.
Exactly. How did that happen gradually?
But it's not the same. I don't believe that your example, and I'm not a Muslim anymore, but I don't believe that your example is valid in this case, because now we're talking about whether between peace and war, and peace and war changes depending on the perception, how each tribe or each side is perceived. And in a lot of time in the Muslim world, they perceived that they were being attacked. I'm not saying that that is the truth or not. That is not what happened, but that was the perception, is that they felt that they were victims and they wanted to expand. And that's how this happened. Whether or not this verse supersedes another verse, I don't believe this. Surah At-Tawbah has its own reason for existing, and it's not to abrogate other verses. It's because God was angry and decided to. So, I don't know. No, for real, because
Thank you Ghada, for explaining that to him.
Because God is angry, and that is, and because it's just true. Because that is, I just don't believe, at least when it comes to that part, this is not the correct abrogation. Especially like the verses. Like one is about be friends with whatever, and it's like be peaceful, and it's. I don't know. It's just not that big of a deal. Like it's not a big ruling, or it's just like in the context of whatever is being talked about.
Can I quickly jump in?
Yeah,
Please.
go ahead.
I think it would be nice to see where Boraz is coming from. Is it your own interpretation, or are you determining that it's abrogated based on some scholarly opinion? I think that would
I am determining that it's abrogated based on scholarly opinion.
And what is your reference for that?
There is a reference in the Quran about Allah providing a better ayah, replacing an older ayah with it.
But how do you know that this ayah specifically replaces the older ayah?
Because it speaks about the exact same subject at a later time.
difference between
can
peace
I
and war.
jump
That's the problem. It's like it's not the same. It's not like the verse that talks about, you know, don't go to prayer when you're drunk, and then it was superseded by, you know, al-khamr wal maisir. Forgot what now the verse was like. The one that forbids drinking and gambling.
Yes.
And it's different. That's an essentially like that's a continuation of it. But this, when you're talking about, especially Surah At-Tawbah, especially this surah, it is not a surah that you use at all times. Like even Muslims know this. A lot of Muslims know this, and you know this, Nadir. Like this is what they taught us. This is what it is. Like God was angry because of a certain thing that happened during that time, and that's why the surah was, you know, shown or revealed. It's not abrogating something else that happened. This was a wartime surah.
I think
Yeah,
I just want to say something. I think we have to be careful of both views that are being espoused here. Is first of all, usually in my experience, I've seen if some verse is abrogated, it's mentioned by the scholars as it being abrogated.
And it is being mentioned.
And secondly, also we have to be careful of the opinion that we can't just hand wave something just because God was angry, because people consider even a single verse to be the eternal word of God, and then they stick to it. So, and then they act based on it. So, I mean, I'm in the middle over here. Unless like a scholar says specifically that this verse was abrogated, then I would reserve my judgment about that.
If I could just throw something in there real quick, I think Ghada pretty much explained it pretty well, probably better than I could. But Surah 9 verse 5, you know, it doesn't matter if it's abrogating anything, because it really is one of the best verses in the Quran. When we talk about why Islam is a religion of peace, we actually I quote Surah 9 verse 5. Now, Aaron, is it okay if I could share my desktop or on this, or if I could just read the verse for you real quick?
Okay, just read the verse, please.
Okay, sure. So this is a verse which is actually says, and when the sacred months have passed away, kill the polytheists wherever you find them and capture them and besiege them and sit in them, wait for every ambush. So what happens is people cut and paste this verse and say, there you go, look, Islam is teaching to kill people. It's abrogating all the peaceful verses, which is a canard, which we'll deal with later. But what they forget to do is they forget to read the verse right before it. Chapter 9, verse 4. Now let me read that for you.
I thought we were on 7 today.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
9:5.
Yeah, I think we should cut this loose at this point.
Yeah, when we're talking about Surah 7 today.
The reference I'm looking at is Ibn Salama, by the way. If you have a reference.
I suggest
I'm not here to argue the
no,
abrogation.
I just suggest that when y'all reach Surah 9, and it'll be like later when you're in Medina.
It will be the last one.
It will be. So let's just have that conversation then.
Yeah, we should have it then.
No problem.
Today we have a surah that has 200 verses, and they are jam-packed with beauty and fruit and
There's
flowers.
so many stories as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
that's one thing I noticed. I mean, the Quran thus far, for my reading, didn't have a lot of stories in it. I went a few surahs before there was any stories.
Yeah, and then suddenly here's a whack of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's,
I think it's interesting that we're getting this from a different perspective, because it's retelling Bible stories.
Yeah,
But-
it starts off with like a Genesis story, and it's a different version of it as well.
Yeah.
Well,
Just the way you would expect word of mouth traditions to be carried on.
It's not very different, but the way some like very small details are different.
Okay.
well, can I jump in real quick on that?
Sure.
So, one of the scientific miracles, actually, when we talk about Islam, is actually the way it retells the Bible story and corrects the scientific errors of those Bible stories. So you can miss it in the details. Like I'll just give you an example. Noah's flood. And I think you've had a lot of material on this, Aaron. Very eye-opening stuff of
It's Aaron, please.
Oh, I keep listening to that. I'm sorry, Aaron. A worldwide flood is pretty much implausible. It contradicts science. Many scientists have basically voiced their concerns about this, and you have many videos on that. But in the Quran, in chapter 25, verse 74, I think, it actually corrects this notion and says it was a local flood and we just flooded those people. So there is no worldwide flood inside the Quran. So my point here is just...
How is this a scientific miracle?
Well,
I think
okay,
I think we have already talked about this the last time, and Ibn Kathir mentions in his commentary that the waters gushed forth from every part of the earth. So I'm not sure like what you mean with a local flood.
Yeah, so this only increases and strengthens my argument, Mohsin. Let me just answer you, because why don't we find these scientific errors in the Quran? That's my point.
There is one in...
I mean, we are finding it.
Hold on, guys, let me
we agreed to have the discussion on the several scientific errors I have already found in the Quran.
Yes.
And you wanted me to include that with somebody else's larger list, but we weren't able to schedule that for this month.
Okay.
So.
Well, my point here is
May I be a part of that?
The story
yes,
is
please.
the story is being retold to correct the not only just the scientific errors, but also the many wrong teachings, like 1 Samuel chapter 15 verse 3 of the Bible teaches to kill all men, women, and children, including babies. So the Quran in chapter 9 verse 5, which we were actually talking about, corrects that insanity and that genocide and says, no, only those people who are fighting against you. So there's many reasons why the story is being retold.
Okay, well, we're not seeing that in this surah.
No,
Okay,
can we just, can we read the story?
Verse?
I really
Sure.
want to get to the verse that
Yes.
does have the scientific, error.
Okay, that verse is yours.
Thank you.
Okay, I have got a note on 720. Interesting linguistics here in Arabic using the two-person tense, talking about Adam and Eve.
Mhm.
Also,
Why is that weird?
well, it's kind of a new tense for English speakers. English doesn't have a two-person tense.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, because I'm Arab, so this is normal for me.
Yes.
Yeah, it's also,
For you,
if you want to
that's
talk
just-
about scientific errors, there's a big one.
Yeah.
And the Quran says that Adam and Eve were real people. We know that wasn't true.
Okay.
That no part of that story has any basis in fact whatsoever, nor possibility. That is a myth that has been adopted and adapted from elder traditions. All of it is metaphorical, and yet the book declares that it's real.
Okay, let me respond to that. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, you feel like it's, let me just reiterate just so that I make it clear as far as what the error is. This, from what you understand, this contradicts how man evolved, because they didn't start from an Adam and Eve or something like that.
No,
Okay.
it's worse than that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
So let me, go ahead and articulate it just so I can respond.
Sure. So like the story of Adam and Eve is actually made out of components of a number of other elder mythologies. There's like Adapa, for example, he was brought before the gods and he was warned not to eat anything that the gods might give him because they would want to kill him for whatever reason, because you know how gods are in men's imaginations. And so the gods don't offer him the fruit of death, they offer him the fruit of life. And if he had eaten it, he would have lived eternally. But because he did not eat it, that means that man is mortal. And this is the original version for why we die, was the story that people made up to explain that. And then in another version, in another completely different myth, the god Enki trespasses on the sacred garden of Inanna, and she has all of these, a whole garden full of forbidden fruit. All of it is forbidden because trespassing is forbidden in the sacred garden, and he eats the fruit. And then so she casts a spell on him, so the immortal falls. See, we have the fallen immortal concept, and then she feels bad that she cursed him and made him fall. So she bears 7 daughters to cure each of the wounds that were caused to him. And one of them was Ninti, who was born the daughter of the rib, for she was meant to close the wound to his side. So we can see where the whole Eve thing came from. And that's to say nothing about, the Hebrew tradition of Lilith and all that. But what we're talking about is people making up stories about fictional characters who absolutely never existed in real life. And we know that all of it is metaphorical. I mean, the bit about the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the fruit of the tree of eternal life, we know that these were not trees that you could chop down and build a house out of. These are not literal things. This was a metaphor, and it was only a story. No part of that, in any sense, actually happened.
Okay, so it looks like we have 2 problems here with the story of Adam and Eve. Number one, if it contradicts evolution, as far as what we know about evolution.
We're not even talking about evolution. We're talking about
The pagan borrowing.
There's not even a relation. We're talking about things that are clearly metaphor, can only be metaphorical, and in fact, their only value is as metaphor. And yet the Quran, like the Bible, are presenting these as if it actually happened.
Okay, so the problem is pagan borrowing from mythological, metaphorical myths. That's what your objection is.
No, the problem is Jewish initially borrowing from pagan myths, the stuff people made up that the Jews then put into their original Tanakh, which the Christians then borrowed, which the Muslims then borrowed. But it originally came from people's imagination only.
Okay, now I think I understand. So let me go ahead and respond to that. The argument actually doesn't work with Islam, and here's the reason why. Because inside chapter 16, verse 36, I believe, it says over there, and prophets, messengers, were sent to every nation of people on earth. And inside chapter 22, verse 67, it says, and we have given all these nations sacred rites which they are to perform. So basically that means even from the Chinese to the Dravidians to the white and the black, they were all given prophets and messengers. So we don't just believe in the Israelite lineages of prophets. So a lot of that message of what they had, of whether it's a story of Adam and Eve or Noah's flood or whatever it be, that message originally from God has now been fragmented into the different and made its way into the different fables and legends and stuff like that. So that doesn't disprove Islam. The question is, really what it comes down to is, who do we believe? Do we believe in chapter 16, verse 36, that messengers were given to all people, or do we believe it was from pagan borrowing? So my point here...
Well, let's pretend for a moment that we're going to believe the chapter that you said, that exactly what you said is completely true. It's not, but we're just going to take as given that it's exactly true.
Mm-hmm.
That does nothing to address the issue. It does not in any sense do what you said before, correcting the scientific errors in these previous myths. It reinforces them by reasserting that Adam and Eve were real people and that really happened. We know that it did not, but the Quran says that it did. So it doesn't matter how many other people had other prophets in other times, in other places. The Quran now is coming down with God's direct dictation to say that Adam and Eve were real people. No, they weren't.
Okay, well, let me just respond to that. So the problem with the story of Adam and Eve, and evolution is, I think it originates with a Christian. I'll show you how actually Islam does correct the scientific errors in just a second.
Okay.
But the biggest problem is when you want to study about the origin of man, the Christians said they would present the story of Adam and Eve. There you go. The Bible is true because the Bible said so. What don't you understand? But the scholars and the evolutionists, the scientists, no, they actually traveled the earth from Africa to Americas, and they dug up these bones and found Australopithecus. They found all this. They said, no, we have to do archaeology. So that's where the big divide was. But Islam fixes that problem and it corrects a scientific error in the following ways.
Give me the chapter and verse where the Quran says Adam and Eve were only fictional characters and not to believe that it was literally true.
There is no problem with believing in an Adam and Eve because of the following reasons.
Except that it's not literally true, and we know this.
Well, let's let me first.
I mean, we're certain about that.
Like literally in this chapter, God said that He created Adam from clay.
Yes.
Right. So we have a scientific error based on a magic spell, the golem spell, which the Quran is now saying literally happened. And we are to believe that because there is not a verse anywhere in the Quran that says...
It also mentioned that the existence of Iblis, the devil, and that he was made out of fire.
Yeah, and we're not even getting into the... We're not even getting into the earlier issues in the Quran that we talked about in previous episodes.
So the Islamic Adam is very different from the Adam of the pagan legends and the Bible. And here's the reason why I say it doesn't contradict science. Because number one, if you look in the Quran, it never said Adam was the first man. Okay, that's okay. Well, you shared it with me if you like, Ghada. That's the first point. The second thing is Adam is presented as an evolving man, meaning Adam is not like this. What you see, what we have, this is not. Islam does present the concept of evolution within the hadith. Why don't you go? So what I've done basically, you guys, I've sent you a hadith, which if you like, you could share your desktop. You can click on it. And let me read it for you real quick. So we could read it together. And this is coming, it says, Adam, the prophet said Adam was 60 cubits tall, and people have been decreasing in stature since Adam's creation. Now, here's what I want to point out. Don't focus too much on what is evolving, but rather the concept.
Where is that any different
No,
from?
that doesn't. It doesn't. No,
Okay, what's wrong with my argument here?
That
Well,
it,
one thing-
it doesn't, because that's
First
not
of
how
all-
it worked.
first of all,
It was
because there
actually the
are
complete opposite in the evolution.
Yeah.
The first Homo sapiens, and
Mhm.
we're not large. We're not big. We
But
were
Adam
small.
was not by.
We were larger
by
than Neanderthals,
Sure.
but we were still not big. And Adam was 60 feet, or like arm length high. No, that doesn't make any sense.
Okay, well, let me respond to that.
look,
So,
you-
do you see the contradiction there?
Look,
You said
no, I don't
Adam
see
was
the
60.
problem. The
Yeah.
problem that you're trying to defend completely pointlessly here.
And at no point, like, who is this Adam?
Okay, hold on. Let me
There
Why
answer.
does he
Adam.
have a wife that came from his rib? Because women did not come from a man's rib.
Okay, let me answer. Okay, we're bringing up a lot of points here. Let me.
No, but that's so
Okay.
that you can't.
I don't want to turn this into an argument.
Because it can't be real.
But
Because
it is
all
an
of this
argument.
is.
Okay,
It's
let's
It
take time
is an
to.
argument. You are saying Adam
Okay.
and Eve.
I
are-
think we're okay. Let me respond to just all that stuff which is being said. But there's a contradiction in what you're saying. You see, if we were to look at this strictly from a scientific point of view, from the way an evolutionary scientist would look at this, he's not going to look at Adam as a Homo sapien, because Adam, as you said, was 60 cubits tall, and that's not what a Homo sapien is. So what we have here there's many possibilities here, and I'm not saying this is the exact possibility, but
So Adam was
one of
a
the possibilities, you've got the Homo sapiens coming from one lineage, you got Adam's lineage coming here, and from his progeny, they could have mated with someone on this, coming from this line, and thus that's how we.
Okay, so
All
inventing.
Yeah, but there is no
There's many
evidence for
possibilities.
that.
Okay, inventing new scientific errors is not going to correct the scientific
Correct.
errors that are already there.
What
Besides,
scientific-
regardless, I mean, it's easy to debunk this point, is because
Yes.
even in your wild interpretation, even if we accept your wild interpretation, Eve is said to have come, which is actually a more favorite story of mine than Adam's, by the way. Eve is said to have come from the rib of Adam, and then
Okay.
how do you explain in the evolutionary context?
Okay, so let me answer that question. So the thing is that what I want to correct everybody here is a story of Adam and Eve doesn't contradict science. And if you look,
It does.
It
Okay.
definitely does.
100%.
Yes. on
I would
every
like to see
scale.
from one reference, if you could, from a scientist, an evolutionary biologist, whoever, who says Adam and Eve, to believe in an Adam and Eve is scientifically incorrect. And that's
Dr.
not
Francis Collins,
what-
head of the Human Genome Project, is an
Right.
evangelical Christian who says that the Adam and Eve story is impossible because it violates
biblical one.
science.
The biblical one. But we have a very different
The
version.
biblical
It's
one
not-
and
How
the
is
one.
it different? It is
Okay.
very, very similar. It is
There's
exactly
similarity.
the story in Genesis
Okay.
written.
What's
is
the contradiction in
story.
science with the Islamic Adam and Eve? Tell me. What is it?
Adam and
A
Eve
spouse
does not
coming off,
exist.
like your
The
female
cross-
partner coming
Yeah,
from
one
They
at a
were
time.
not there. There is no Garden of Eden. There is no serpent that went over. Like, there is
Adam and
none
Eve,
of
guys.
this is real because
Wait.
it didn't happen. There is no
Right.
evidence
There,
for it.
there is no tree of knowledge of good and evil. There is no tree of eternal life. These are metaphors that if in all through the Bible they do the same kind of thing. If you eat of the fruit of, or you take the fruit of, and what that means is that this is going to be the result of this action or this decision. Everywhere except Genesis, this is read as metaphorical. Only in Genesis is it read as literal, right? So there was no damn tree. There was no Adam. There was no Eve. These are fictional characters entirely. There was not a 6-foot Adam. There was not a 60-foot Adam. That is another scientific error. You can't have people that are 60 cubits tall. That's not possible. The same thing that the Quran, the surah that we're looking at right now, also talks about Pharaoh and Moses and the Exodus and turning sticks into snakes, using more magic spells for an event that archaeologists uniformly agree never happened.
Okay.
The Exodus didn't happen.
Okay, let's first
That's
deal with
another
all
fiction.
the issues about the garden, the rib, and all of these things which you are raising, and there's a very simple explanation for that.
Yes, it's all fables.
Well,
That's
hold
the
on.
simple
Yes.
explanation.
Aaron,
There is
No.
a very complicated apologetics excuse to try to hide that
Okay.
fact, but that's what it is.
That's your faith proclamation.
I don't have a
Aaron.
faith proclamation.
You have not proved these are okay. Look, the story of
Wait, what do you mean we have not proved that Adam and Eve are not real?
guys.
It
Hold
has
on.
been proven.
Let me. Listen. These are things
wait,
not
Mr.
prove or
Mr. Nadir,
disprove.
just a
Okay.
second.
Now let me
Just a
answer. If I can
That
answer Aaron
train-
first, Boraz.
No, just a second. That train that Adam and Eve existed has passed a long time ago. If you want to get onto something, get onto the point that this is a metaphorical story, and
Okay.
that's where it stops and ends. There is no 70-foot Adam. And how big does Eve need to be at that point? Does she get to be 65 feet long?
Okay, let me answer. So what I see happening here is you guys are basically shoving your beliefs down my throats. I understand.
No.
These are not beliefs. These are
These
scientific
are
facts.
your
Your
beliefs.
negation. Okay, let me answer, guys, about the rib stuff and the garden, if I may. Okay,
Please.
so the reason why this doesn't contradict science is because this falls under the category of the definition of a miracle. And don't cut me off, guys. I'm going to read it for
Sorry,
you.
but it
Okay.
does. The reason that it
Okay, guys.
does
I
contradict-
actually really want to hear this. I
Okay,
want to know
okay.
what he's saying.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
just-
So I've sent you a link inside the chat, and we can read together. Definition of a miracle is an event that appears inexplicable by the laws of nature. So when it comes to issues of when God says, I did this, and we don't apply science to things like Jesus walking on water, Muhammad healing the people who are sick. We don't apply science to these things because this is beyond science. So when we say, okay, God created Eve from the rib of Adam, this was a miracle, and we don't apply science to that. Now, from the scientific point of view, the way they view miracles is they are not going to confirm or deny any of this stuff. They're going to say this is something we've not seen any evidence for, therefore we're not going to affirm it. So that's why I'm saying you guys your beliefs about Adam and Eve and the garden and the rib, these are your own personal beliefs. I
No, they're
respect
not.
them, but I feel
They
like you
are
want to shove
not.
them
No,
down
I
my
think-
throat.
these are
Can
the
I- can I-
scientific positions. You can apply.
What you said
Science.
right now about Adam and Eve and the miracle, that is your opinion. That is your belief. What
It's
we are
hypothetically
saying,
possible.
it's hypothetically impossible.
When we
For it
talk
to
to
be real.
atheists,
This
Christians,
story is hypothetically impossible. It can't happen. It's a fable. It's a story.
keep
There's-
repeating
The
it.
only reason you believe it is because it's in your holy book.
What you're doing, you're
Read it.
chanting a
No,
mantra.
Let me talk to you, because this is something that I have actually done with my family as well.
Okay.
Is like, and this is truth. The only reason religious people believe any of these stories that are in their religious books is because it is in their religious book. No matter how weird and strange and bizarre they may seem, even if it is about a guy that throws a stick on the ground and then suddenly it's a real snake and then eats all of the fake snakes, and then all of the other wizards and witches fall and in sujood, and then the pharaoh goes and kills all of them. Even more bizarre than that. But if you had read that exact same story written in a different manner in a science fiction book, you would be like, this is bullshit. This is not real. But
Well,
you read it
can I
and
respond?
then you find ways to make it, no, this is scientifically correct. Let me show you why.
Yeah, and you can't just
Well,
make
I
your
see.
assertion.
Because you're not starting from the question of how in the very beginning. You have the conclusion and you're starting to find evidence of the conclusion. That is not scientific evidence. That is wrong. That is belief. What you have is belief. What we are trying to say, that this has no scientific evidence.
Okay.
Therefore it doesn't exist.
And
Therefore it is wrong.
Okay, so what I see happening here is really you're chanting a mantra. You can tell me you're wrong, you shouldn't believe in that, and that's
I don't
fine.
even
But
believe whatever you want. It's just I'm telling you.
I believe. Now let me tell you why we should believe in Islam.
Correct.
Hold on a
Okay,
second.
but- hold on a second.
Hold on a second. We are talking about things that matter to science, right?
Yes.
We're talking about evidence of history that we can verify scientifically. You said that I couldn't find a believing scientist that would say that Adam and Eve were impossible. Yeah, I did have a believing scientist who has, genetic reasons to verify that the very thing that you're saying is impossible. There are two different avenues, both that we had a human population that was, only 2 people is absolutely impossible.
That's not what we believe.
And we what?
That's not what we believe. I've already told you.
And then the other thing that you said, about the 60-foot tall giants interbreeding with people, no genetic evidence for that at all.
That's not what we believe. So here's what I
Why don't you tell me what you believe, and then show me the scientific evidence.
What's happening here on this? What everyone's doing.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Just 10 minutes ago, you said there are 70-foot Adams interbreeding with 65-foot giants. You just brought this up less than 10 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm seeing happening.
If you are going to stick to what you say, stick to what you say. Okay?
Well,
the point we are trying to get to is there is no science behind the Adam and Eve story. That's a metaphor. And if you want to be successful, literally, if you want to take an advice of an atheist to how to spread your religion better, stick with the metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every time you bring this up as a scientific fact, people will laugh you out.
No. This is not being brought up as a scientific fact.
Well,
I show that the Quran is a scientific miracle, I don't go back to the story of Adam and Eve. And by the way, for let me tell you what the score is here, Ghada Ibrahim. When it comes to the Quran being a scientific miracle and the way you're mocking and laughing, we have already won the debate on that, to be very honest with you. We have many debates.
With who?
Presented
How did you win the debate?
Hold on, guys. Let me finish my point. In which we have presented our scientific evidence. And
I wonder why the scientific community is unaware of that.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just, without being cut off all the time here, guys, just give me an opportunity to speak. All of the Islam critics, which you see on the internet, they have looked at our evidences, and they have all ran away like cowards from debating, discussing, or even talking to me about it.
Well,
we have effectively silenced all criticism, but I'm open for discussion.
Mr. Nadir.
So, okay, look, everyone's talking over each other again.
Okay,
so,
just a second.
Or if that story. I don't think Nadir understands the irony of.
Listen,
No, for real. I would really like to discuss this with you, for real.
And
I'd love to. I can't find anyone who will go toe to toe with me.
I will do it. I don't even know what you have on there. I will not run away.
A better person than that coward apostate prophet and Abdullah Samir and all those clowns who are running away scared.
Can I quickly jump in here? Jump in? I see. What seems to be happening, right? And this is Nadir likes to say this a lot. It seems to me what's happening, but you keep bringing this up, right? You keep bringing this up of scientific errors and scientific miracles, and sort of in a loop, right? Like the score. Let me repeat the score. These people are running from me. Yep. I mean, all these things have nothing to do with the topic at hand. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand. So let me just finish. We're trying to understand, we're trying to study something, and then we're trying to use reason to be able to understand that. We're not coming in with a sort of like a practice line, like which you seem to keep repeating, and then you're just throwing all these assertions out there, and sort of like gish galloping, and it becomes very difficult to be able to study the chapter that we have at hand, right? So why don't we simplify this? Why don't you tell me what you think is scientific about the whole Adam and Eve story, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so let me first. I was actually responding to what Ghada was saying. She was saying, why should we believe in these fairy tales? If you saw this in another book, you would pass it off as nothing but fiction. The reason why you believe Islam is because it is backed because the science inside the Quran, no man could have known it 1400 years ago. And we have
that is another story, and that is another topic that I will.
Guys, stop interrupting.
No. I want to say this because I don't want you to run away from me either. I want to have this conversation with you. For real.
Let's do it. I have more respect for you than that clown Abdullah Samir and all these so-called.
There we go again.
Islam.
Yep.
Keep doing it and call that people like David Wood and all the people who make those scientific error videos. You will see those will not help you because there's a good reason why they're running. But let me go back to the Adam and Eve story.
Okay. Well,
because that's what we need to talk about. Okay, my point about the Adam and Eve, and I think the problem here is there's got to be a time where you got to, a point where you got to hear me out totally so you can understand and see what we believe about this. Then you jump in to criticize and attack and refute. That's fine. I don't got a problem with that. But as I told you, why it doesn't contradict science is because the Quran never said Adam was the first man. So the whole thing about we got this population over here and stuff, that doesn't apply to us. It doesn't also contradict science because the concept of the miracle. Adam and Eve were miracles by God. Now, from a scientific point of view, they're just going to back away from that. Wait, we don't confirm or deny miracles. That's the scientific point of view. Third, you brought up something about someone criticizing the story of Adam and Eve, and maybe I should have articulated myself better because I was wrong about saying, show me one reference, because then that's a fallacy of appeal to authority. We need to see.
No. It's not an appeal. The appeal to authority is not a fallacy. It's an appeal to false authority. There's also the argument from authority, which is another fallacy that I am an authority, therefore I'm right. No, you still have to have a valid argument. But what your statement was to ask whether there was a believing scientist who could give scientific reasons why Adam and Eve was impossible. There are believing scientists who can give scientific reasons, not argument from authority, which would be a fallacy, but the argument from the fact coming from actual authorities, actual experts.
You are right.
There's nothing fallacious about that.
We can all agree a static atom does contradict science.
And Adam 60 feet tall contradicts
That's the miracle. God can do whatever he wants. Again, just
so what you're saying,
what
you're saying is that every time your holy book says something we know to be impossible, you just believe it anyway, on the excuse that, well, if it's impossible, then it's a miracle.
No, it's not impossible.
It's impossible for people to be 60 feet tall or 60 meters tall.
You have to grasp the concept of what a miracle is.
Okay,
and to understand when you read in the text of the Quran, let me finish, that and I did this. God is intervening within nature and doing some kind of miracle, whether it's walking on water, whether it's healing the blind. You cannot apply science to these things. And once you see and understand that, the whole issue of Adam being tall is a non-issue. The whole issue of Eve being created from the rib of Adam is a non-issue. But we can at least agree with you guys, and I'm that we do believe in an evolving Adam. Just don't focus on what is evolving, but the concept that is in the hadith that Adam is not like us, he changed. We
the problem is worse
changed
than
from generation to generation.
The problem is worse than that.
Okay.
In my perspective, in doing science, right? I mean, I may believe because, when I say in believe, that I'm led to think that this is most likely, probably closest to the truth, right? I'm not making believe. I'm not forcing myself. I'm not trying to convince myself. This is just what I think is most likely true. Okay, so now I may believe in that sense in a particular thing for a long time, and I maybe even be invested in it. But then evidence will surface that shows that that's wrong, and then what I have to say? You know what? I was wrong. That belief is wrong. I have to change my mind, right? There is no time when you possess the ability to say that something that happened in the Quran didn't really happen. You are unable to admit that. And that's the problem. So I am a free thinker, and you are bound to a belief system. Has required beliefs, has prohibited beliefs. You are not a free thinker. You can't ever admit, no matter how obvious it is, that Adam and Eve never existed, that's not a literally true story. You cannot admit that. That's the problem.
Show me some proof for that they didn't exist. What I will
I just
for
did
you.
mention.
No, here's what I'll do for you, Aaron. If you can show me some proof that Adam and Eve never existed, then what I would say, I would continue to believe in Islam, but what I would say, there are issues within Islam which contradicts the theory of evolution. But I've just chosen to believe in Islam. So I can do that for you.
That's not even evolution.
Or science, or whatever you would like to call it. So I'm open. Aaron, I want you to understand. Aaron, I keep saying, Aaron, I am open-minded. I try to be. And I hope you just give me an opportunity, give me a chance to, when you present your evidence. But I believe the way Islam presents Adam and Eve, it's no way you can prove or disprove that. At least from what I see.
You made a testable statement when you talked about these giants interbreeding with Homo sapiens.
No, they went from generation, they got smaller, and then once they got to a certain size, then they could, it's a theory, they could have intervened and, or
Okay, so you're taking the scientific miracle and you are putting it in the context of science, making testable claims that are unsupported by anything.
Mhm.
And where we would expect to find the evidence to back you, it does not exist. We found evidence. We found the genome for Neanderthals within some humans. We found the genome for Denisovans within some humans. But we did not find 60-foot Adam.
You're right. You're right. There is no evidence for what I'm saying, but this is an argument from silence from what I'm seeing. Just because you don't see no evidence for it, like for example, I'll give you an example. Where is the engineering manual for the pyramids? We don't have it. And we would like to look at it because we'd like to know how they created that. So there is a lot of stuff which we don't have. But that doesn't prove or disprove something. I just think, look, guys, we need to
slide.
Adam and Eve story can't be proved or disproved from the Islamic perspective is what I'm trying to share with everyone.
The Adam and Eve story is not just not supported by evidence.
No, there's no evidence for it or against it.
It is contradicted by evidence.
How is it
being that we have the similar details in earlier stories that predate that, so we can see the sources for all of this coming out of other human cultures, right? So it's not just
provided an explanation for that.
We've actually got evidence to the contrary.
Yes, we've provided an explanation in chapter 16, verse 36, saying that a prophet was sent to every nation of people. Therefore, that message.
Now, as we just explained, that explanation you just gave does not address this issue and does not correct the scientific error that Adam and Eve represent.
I don't still today. I guess I'm missing what
in the genome.
I'll say something. We're speaking in two different languages, but it's okay. I would really love to read what you came up with, Nadir, and please do send it to me after all of this. But I really think we should start reading our surah.
Yeah, let's go.
We need to run out.
Yes.
I think we should.
I will not back out.
Okay, so Bogi, did you have any other? Would you have any notes on why this thing starts out with the letters that it does?
They never. It's always been a question. The best explanation is that only God knows what these have meaning for, and they might have a miracle of some sort meaning, but there's no actual explanation that we know that is known. They're just a bunch of theories.
So Ibn Kathir just makes an assertion basically about these surahs, is that the wisdom behind mentioning these letters in the surahs is that they're to testify to the miracle of the Quran. And I mean, and that's pretty much it says. It says that it's only 1 letter, 2 letter, 3 letter, 4 letter, up to 5 letters, in fact, is because those are the most common words that are used in the speech. And I mean, he tiptoes around this, but like eventually Ghada is right that that only Allah knows best, basically.
Okay.
Well, which means nobody, but there you go.
Correct, yeah.
Now, Bogi, did you have another verse that you wanted to look at?
Oh, yeah, a lot of them. So we talked about 620. We want to talk a little bit about 726.
726. Okay,
yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 726, which is, I think this might well be the first mention of the children of Adam, referring to humanity.
Okay.
We haven't heard that before, and we're going chronological, so there we go. The first time to come up, the garment of God, the garment of God consciousness, which you
where
asked.
is this?
This is 726.
Oh yeah, walibasut taqwa, the God's garments.
Yes.
What is that? How did they translate it?
It's very complicated, and obviously Aaron can only read the English, so I'm trying to help here.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit handicapped.
Yeah, he is.
I'm trying to see like how is it translated? That
it calls it an adornment. Called a
translated as a garment of God.
This is not
no, it's not good.
That's not what it means. So it's not an actual garment. It's in this verse is actually a metaphor for being a what's the word?
Aware of nudity. Is that what you're going?
No. The one before it, yes. Now they are aware of being nude. But this particular verse is talking about in addition to covering yourself with actual clothes to cover your the things that you want to cover when you're wearing, he also wants you to wear the dress of piety and it's not subservience. It's more like just to be more of a good or better person, and it's mostly it's going to be piety is probably a good word for this.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so
you
basically have a certain internal feeling about your body and not being ashamed of it, regardless of the fact that in the Garden of Eden, both Adam and Eve were completely nude, and it didn't bother them until they ate from the tree.
Then they found out that they were nude.
Then they found out that they were nude, and they also found out that that was inappropriate and needs covering. And then they started plucking off the leaves of the tree to cover themselves up. So essentially, the garment of God is the notion. It's actually a notion in Adam and Eve's head that they should be covered up. Am I wrong here?
Because especially when you're talking about unfortunately so the way what this is saying, like it's telling people like you sons of Adam, we're giving you two garments essentially. The first garment is going to be the garment that is going to cover your nakedness, and the second garment is another garment that is internal. It's about who you are. It's the piety. It's being humble, being humble to God. It's a part. So like the first part is for them, for this body, for this earth's, this world's body, and the other thing is their piety, their love for God, their devotion to God.
And that works like a garment.
In a way, yes, but it's a more of a metaphor.
I'm not disagreeing.
It's not a real garment. It's a metaphor of a garment.
One of the handicaps that I have in only speaking English is that when I read Abdel Halim's translation, I then have to compare it to at least a couple of other translations as well as whatever tafsirs for clarification. So in clear Quran, it says that we gave you the clothing to cover your bodies and for luxury, but the clothing of piety, that is better. So that makes clear that if they're talking about something metaphorical.
It is metaphorical. It's from the heart, wherever
Ghada is correct. So
yeah, we actually agree on the metaphorical garment thing.
Yeah, so it implies both. It implies like covering your private parts, and also like some scholars, some interpretations consider it as the libas of taqwa, which is the consciousness of God.
Yeah, which in this particular verse, I'm just carving it a little bit narrowly. And Ghada, you're right. Generally, that's what it is.
So since we're on this topic, can I just like also say something that might be of interest to people? Is so when Adam and Eve were not aware of each other's private parts, do you know what kept them from seeing each other's private parts? It's just
probably saw each other's private, just didn't bother.
No, before they ate the fruit.
I think they were just not aware of it. It's like when a child. It's like when you bring up a child in the nudist community, they just don't notice that they're naked.
Yeah, it's just second nature. For them.
So
we're all good. That's it.
So actually, the hadith is that the correct interpretation is that the private parts of Adam and Hawa had a light covering them, which prevented them from seeing each other's private parts.
Interesting.
I don't think so.
No, it's. I can actually give you the. Ibn Jarir reported the statement with an authentic chain of narration, so it comes from Wahab bin Munabi.
Yeah.
And if you read the tafsir, it's very interesting to read the tafsir. I'll probably make it my my everyday hobby.
So
when they ate from the tree, their private parts appeared to them, and the light went away.
So glowing genitals.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
And too bright.
Okay, so I don't know how to address that. I think we should just move on.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just conjecture inside some of these commentaries.
Well, Ibn Jarir reported this to have an authentic chain of narration, so I'm not sure what you mean by conjecture.
Leading back to whom?
It doesn't mention that in the tafsir,
Okay.
but I mean, Ibn Jarir should be an authority enough even for you to accept this.
That's a fallacy of appeal to authority.
That's
Well,
exactly
that's what
why.
Muslims do that all the time.
Well,
That's exactly why I don't use hadith in argument.
no, hadith.
Hadith
is not appeal to
the
authority.
first thing you're gonna do is you tell me that my hadith is not authentic enough.
No, I don't do that actually.
That's why we don't do hadith.
No. This is not a hadith. He's quoting a commentary. Okay, so that's hadith we accept, and I have no problem discussing and debating that. And don't worry.
Yeah, I know you don't have a problem discussing and debating it, but all I have to say when you bring a hadith is that, hey, that reference of that hadith is not good enough, and your hadith is out to lunch.
I'll make a promise. I will never do that to you. How about that?
That's a good mutual promise we should keep.
Let's shake.
That may be difficult.
Okay, so 731 uses the word zina, which includes blinks and jewelry,
Yes.
right? So it's 731, 29, 30, 30, بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد, aka dress up on your Sunday best, I mean more probably on your Friday best, and put on your jewelry. And for men, usually at that time, it was customary to use eye color, or what's it called, Ghada?
Kuhul.
Kuhul, right? So it doesn't go dress up for the mosque, right?
Mm-hmm.
وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تَسْرِفُوا, because that would be a bad idea. You should not be an extravagant person.
Because God does not like that.
I don't know how the Saudis square this one out, though.
Yeah, let's not talk about them.
Let's not. Okay. So 733. We're back to sin oppression, right? Is there thankful kind? Yeah, we are not elaborate here. Shameful deeds. My hangout on that one is 733, by the way.
But everybody knows what the al-baghi, at least in Arabic,
Yeah.
that means having sex outside of marriage. That literally is what it means.
Yeah. What I hung out here is shameful deeds, seen and unseen. Is that thought crime here?
No. Usually al-fawahish means sins. Any sin.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. But usually a larger sin than a white lie, like a real actual sin.
Okay. Yeah, I was just musing on that one. It's going like, where does this go anyways? Okay, 734. Predestination cannot be hastened or delayed even by 1 hour. We just previous sessions we were discussing predestination in Islam, and this is just tangential to that, I guess.
Talking about the predestination versus the free will topic, right? It's something I've tried to grapple a lot, and I think Islam's perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nadir, is that of soft determinism and sort of a compatibilism where, yes, you are predestined because God has written it in the Qadr, but at the same time, you don't know what God's plan is, so you still can make some choices based on the things that come in front of you. I think it's a difficult position to defend, is because our choices are determined by so many factors that we're not even aware of. You know, like if we're holding a warm cup of coffee, for example, could affect our decision making. I mean, so it's a difficult position to defend, but I think like that's what the Islamic position on this is.
So if we look inside chapter 7, verse 146, it pretty much talks about how this qadr or this predetermination is working. It says over there, but if they see the way of error, then they adopt that way. That is because they have rejected our evidences and signs and were heedless from them. So yes, there is a sense of where people are predetermined, but there's also a free will component as well. Now, how do they work together? We don't know. But what we do know is inside actually right before chapter 7, verse 6, it explains what predestination is not. And this was actually Aaron's argument he mentioned in our last discussion. It's actually in the Quran. It said inside over there, chapter 6, verse 148, if God willed, we would not have taken this false worship with him, nor would our fathers. We would have not forbidden anything against God's will if God willed it. That means we are been predetermined. So here's that argument again. So God responds, or the author of the Quran responds like this. Likewise, the people before them argued the same thing till they tasted our wrath. Say to them, and this is what I'm supposed to say to the whole group over here. Have you knowledge that you can produce for us? Verily, you follow nothing but guess, and you do nothing but lie. So the whole argument that God is predetermining people, therefore it's God's fault if they burn in hell, the response is, you follow nothing but a guess, and you do nothing but lie. But at the same time, God doesn't explain how it works. So
correct. I mean, don't you think like it would have been much more helpful if God, instead of threatening us, would have given a way for us to figure out how this works?
So that has actually been answered elsewhere in the Quran. I'll get you that verse where they say the disbelievers say, in fact, it gives a better example of that. Why didn't the messenger, Prophet Muhammad, come with 2 angels on each side, coming from heaven with a book? Then if we see that, then we will believe. So
no, I don't think reasonable people think like that. I think only people
there are people
who are unreasonable think of
right.
heavens and
Correct.
fairies and coming down from the heaven. But surely God can produce some evidence that can convince everybody on this earth.
And we have it. And that'll come in the next discussion where we talk about the scientific evidences for Islam. I'll also send you some of my previous debates on that if you like. Ghada, I'll email you that, and we can do it at a later time.
Okay.
Okay, I was just remembering, since you brought it up, that it was in Surah 2 that what my argument came from, where God decides who will believe and who won't, and that He will close, our eyes and ears so that we won't believe, and then punish us for the thing that He did to us.
But what in 6:148 is saying here is, so the disbelievers will say, look, it's your fault why we got misled. But God said, nope, that's your guess. That you're just lying. And that's not
so
the way Qadr works. Well, it says, verily, you are just guessing and doing nothing but lie.
Which one?
This is chapter 6, verse 148.
Okay. So it's interesting that you're saying that guesses are equivalent to lies.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
the verse says, verily, you follow nothing but guess. And if you know it, and then you know that all you're doing is just making something up, and you're affirming it, then that becomes a lie on your part. At least that's what God will accuse you of doing. Okay. So the point here, what I'm trying to get here is that how predestination works, this is being kept from us, but...
Okay, I have to stop you there.
Go ahead.
Okay, the word here is dhan.
Dhan.
And it's not guess. There's another surah that talks about what dhan means, and it is thinking badly, or it's like ill thinking of somebody else. Because it talks about, like, because that verse, and I forgot which verse of the Quran, but it says, Inna ba'da dhanni ithm. So not all ill thinking is going to be a sin, but some of it is. And I believe this is what he is referring to here. So it's not a guess. It is ill thinking.
Yeah, and it would be another thing if you talk about the reason that I don't believe is because all I do is guess and all I do is lie. Okay, so I would say that there's a certain degree of science is definitely guesswork. I think any honest, objective investigation of anything would have to have some hypotheses that you can then test, and those hypotheses are initially guesses, which we can then test for because they're verifiable or falsifiable by some means.
There might be a misunderstanding. It's talking about if you appear on the day of judgment with to God with this excuse, you made me astray, then God is going to respond to you in this manner.
But it's very difficult for me to come to terms with that. Is because, I mean, when we were reading chapter 54 a couple of weeks back, I think, it says that, I think Imam Ahmad recorded that everything is predetermined, even laziness and intelligence. So is it my fault, for example, like that I'm lazy, or I don't have the intellectual capacity to be able to reason with that. Surely, if I'm not able to see or see the evidence, if you will, it's because of my lack of intelligence. And besides, what do you tell people who don't even read the Quran or who don't even understand and accept Islam? I mean, they will definitely go to heaven is because they have the taqwa, right? And then what about those people who were born before they turn, who died as babies, right? So you know that all babies go to heaven. Is that correct?
Well, I believe the way we view it is all children are Muslim by birth.
Correct.
So they will all die as Muslims.
Correct. Okay. And then they will go to heaven. Is that correct?
Well, again, this is something which only God would have to
Okay.
determine. But
So they are Muslim for sure.
Yes,
So then,
So all these children, they're Muslim by birth, including myself.
So what we believe is that all children are born on something called fitra, which is a human nature, an inclination to believe in God. But then it's that parents who then steer them into polytheism or into some other belief system.
No, I would likewise argue that, of course, we're born not believing anything until we're lied to. And that's what makes us Muslim or Christian or Jain or whatever.
But you're not God, Aaron.
Yeah, I realize. So God is going to see me on that day, and he's going to say that, no, but all you do is lie, and that itself is a lie because I don't lie. So there's a problem with that argument.
Well, and I just wanted to bring the point home. I just wanted to bring the point home, is that isn't it like inherently unfair that those kids get to die earlier than me? And I mean, I've had to live through my adulthood, and then I've made the wrong choices.
And potentially sin.
It would have been better if I had died as a baby.
Yeah,
it's worse than that, because if they start out as Muslim and then they're not Muslim now, well, then they're apostates, and you know what happens with apostates, right?
Correct. So predestination does seem unfair in this case.
Well, now it's also very possible that if a child dies, let's say in infancy, he could get another test in the next life. The test doesn't end.
I mean, that's just now that is what I would call conjecture, because if you ask any scholar of Muslim, I'm pretty sure they will tell you that the babies will go to heaven.
Well, there is a tape I will actually.
What kind of test would a person which doesn't even have a sense of intelligence or reason, can they go to hell? You mean that? I mean, if there's a test, there's a possibility of going to hell then?
Well, so here's the way it works. Okay, and that's found inside chapter 3, verse 182. And this, I think, addresses it so it can remove the conjecture. It says, that is for what your hands have put forth, and because God is never unjust to his servants. So how it's going to work out, how the balance going to weigh, we don't know, but we have been given a promise there will be no injustice here. I hope that can resolve the discussion.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the scholars back in India, I mean, he's not a scholar, he's a mufti, but who's capable of giving fatwas, but he said to me very interestingly that even though I'm an atheist, or even though I don't believe in God, I actually am more Muslim than Muslims are usually. Like, I mean, I just don't believe things because they've been told to me. I try to reason it, and I read the Quran, for example, which people don't. And even though it's with the intention of skepticism, but you are doing those things which God might find pleasing and send you to heaven. In fact, like for example, in Aaron's case, right? He doesn't lie, or at least he claims to be, and rightly so, I guess.
Yeah, and then we have
important to me that
verse. So what is it? I believe it is verse 36 here, saying that people that don't believe in our verses and they don't accept them, those people will go to hell. Yeah. But I mean, I am reading this book and I don't believe in it.
But that's what they say, is that they verbally you might be denying that, but you are living a life which is sort of like more Muslim.
Yes, I know, but he says here in the Quran, God says that I'm still going to be of the people of hell, because even though I don't lie, I live an authentic life. I try to do as much good as I can, but I don't believe this book. Therefore, I deserve to be tortured in hell for eternity.
Well, I think we talked about this last
And then the next verse right after that says that we are people like us that read this and we don't believe in God. We reject his existence, reject this book, and reject his religions. We are the most evil.
And I agree with you, Ghada. Your interpretation is what my interpretation is as well.
This is what it says in the Arabic. That's exactly what it says.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I'm just playing the devil's advocate of what was told to me, in order to like water this down. But I agree with you.
No, I don't think there's one thing I think you guys are missing here, and we talked about that last time. Inside chapter 4, verse 115, it's not just believing. It's not just, okay, if you don't believe in this book, you're going to go to hell. It's as if the evidences have been made clear to you. And I believe I just read it for you again inside.
The evidences have been given to me because this is what I grew up in. This is what I lived all my entire life.
Let's
and
do
I still
this.
respected it. So therefore, I am the most evil. I have been given it. I was born in it. I had the Quran, and I received an excellent religious education. And I do thank my mother and my family, and unfortunately the Saudi school system. But that's completely different Islam that we didn't really practice. But in our household. But the thing is, this book is saying that I am the worst of the worst, that I deserve to go to hell for this one simple reason, that all of this has been given to me and I still rejected it.
And that's the complaint that I wrote throughout this surah. It keeps stating one way or another, as most of them do, that it's all about belief. It's not about whether you're a good or bad person. It has nothing to do with your intelligence or the quality of your heart. It's how gullible you are. Do you believe things for which there is no evidence? Do you make any excuse whenever it says something impossible?
Okay.
Well, that's a miracle. I'm just going to believe it anyway. That's what is required. Gullibility is the sole criteria for redemption, and that's it.
No, I think there is I'm going to have to correct you on one thing. To believe in something which there is no evidence, you should not be obliged to believe in that, and that's something we actually all agree.
But
Chapter 4, verse 115 says...
No. Before you rattle it off,
Yeah.
That's exactly what belief is.
Okay, we're getting into the mantra stuff.
You believe what's written in that book as the ultimate truth over everything.
Because if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter what the evidence is, you're going to hell. Evidence or not.
Never since we started reading the Quran, and we're 1/3 in, did
you
it
guys
say...
are chanting your mantra again.
No, it's not a mantra.
It did not come up. Evidence did not come up. Belief, and if no belief, then hell, did come up. So many times we lost count.
Yeah, and please do not project onto unbelievers the mantras and other practices that are exclusive to believers. We are not practicing or reciting a mantra.
Well, that part, I feel I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think everyone from any kind of belief system or non-belief system, they are programmed. Some of them, they have these very hardcore beliefs, and sometimes they get into a position where they just want to shove it down your throat. Like Adam and Eve contradict science, and there's no heaven and hell. There's no such thing as a garden. There's no rib. Don't you understand that? And I felt that's where the discussion was going, rather than, okay, well, these are just, beliefs which we cannot prove or disprove. Just leave it at that. So I do feel like sometimes people got to be more open-minded about these things. And as
I'm completely open-minded. I will entertain any possibility as long as you can show me that it is possible.
I feel like you need to
believe things that are not possible. You're telling me that you have the evidence, but you in fact do not have the evidence. We both know you don't. And the Quran does not ever allow that your mind may be changed because of evidence to the contrary. That is not permitted. So
again,
are you
in this chapter, again, in the next verse 38, verse 39, verse 40, and verse 41, all of it talks about how these people, for the sole reason of disbelieving in God and rejecting the religion, whatever religion has been given during that time, just that. Not talking about, killing in somebody else or raping or anything. No, we're talking about just disbelieving in the existence of this one God.
I pointed out over and over again in the surah that we're talking about
in
now.
this one verse, After that verse that I just spoke, it does it again in 38. It does it again in 39. And it says it's not just torture. Torture upon torture upon torture. And not only that, it says in chapter 40, the heaven's gates will not even open for them. They will never go to heaven. It says so here, never, because these people are criminals. God calls people that just don't believe them criminals. It continues to say that they will only have hell and nothing else because these people are the most vile. These people are the most evil. Mm-hmm. How are we the most evil when we didn't do anything bad in our lives? All we did was just disbelieve in something because why should I believe in this? Because I can't believe in something that I have I disagree with. I disagree with the religion. I can't believe in it.
Here's the answer.
I can't believe in it.
Ghada, here's the answer.
That I'm vile, I am evil, I deserve torture upon torture, for real?
And in my translation, it says that merely disbelieving is doing evil.
Well, chapter 7 does actually address this. And so the answer to your objection, Ghada, is first found inside chapter 4, verse 115. It says over there, and if the truth has been made clear to them, they see the evidences and proof, and then they follow some other way, then they will be held accountable. If they see the clear tabayyin, and that's inside, you can speak Arabic pretty well, that was made clear to them, but then they choose a different way. Now, chapter 7, verse 146.
That's exactly what happened to me.
Well, chapter 7, verse 146 says, but if they see the way of error, then they adopt it that way. Then, continuing, they will be held accountable. So there is not just, okay, do you believe in this? Yes or no? No, I don't got to show you any proof. It's either you believe or you don't. That's not the position of the Quran.
Can I get a point?
No, I have to say something. You did not at all answer what I was talking about.
Yeah.
You did not even address it in the least bit.
A lot of it had to do with you personally, and I want to stay away from that because I don't know you.
You don't know me, but you think for the only reason of me being a non-Muslim, for being a person that rejects God and his existence, that I am the most vile, I am the most evil, I deserve to be tortured in hell for eternity, torture upon torture.
And double the torture.
When I hear that, I would think, okay, so maybe she needs to see what I see. Maybe she needs to see what evidences I have, and we can have that discussion later.
But in general, you're totally okay with me and Aran and Buraz and Mohsin and the rest of the people that are, atheists, agnostics, non-Muslims that know about Islam, that have read about it, that have been exposed to it. And then we still insist on rejecting it and rejecting this God. We are all deserving of eternal life in hell.
Can I get in 3 points, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Please.
Okay. So the first thing is Nadir, it's actually the author of the Quran, Allah, who has a mantra that he keeps repeating in the Quran. It's not us, and we're forced to read it. And the mantra is belief or else, like Aaron puts it very succinctly. Second point is, I think when Ghada, you say that he doesn't, belief is the only criteria whether how good we are or good or bad we are. I think all of this confusion comes from the fact that Muslims believe that what is good is not what moral philosophers are talking about what good is, or whatnot. What is good?
Something that you see, it's the same thing. The concept of halal and haram. The concept of halal and haram is not something good or something bad. It does not actually.
It is.
Sometimes some things that are good are haram, and some things that are bad are halal. Right. But that's so it doesn't have anything to do with haram.
So what I'm saying is morality according to Islam, or just like the theology itself, is that whatever Allah has said is good, and whatever Allah has said is bad. So now if you consider that yardstick, then if you read the Quran, like, okay, you're doing bad things because, disbelief becomes one of the biggest sins under that umbrella of, so then someone who doesn't believe in the Quran, when they say like, okay, no, I'm doing good, disbelieving something is not bad inherently, but it is actually bad according to the theology. And then what happens is, like, my third point is, where heads I win, tails you lose situation, which Nadir is proposing. It's like, okay, If you've seen the evidence and you still reject it, maybe you've not seen enough evidence. So let me give you that evidence. And if you still don't believe, then you've still not seen enough evidence, you know? So it's sort of like, there is no way to, like, how much of the evidence do I have to see, or who decides how much that evidence is before I make up my mind?
I'll accept anything that qualifies as evidence, any body of facts that are positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with that one position over any other available option.
Correct. And then one more point I wanted to bring in is that when discussion devolves into this kind of thing, then they attack our rational senses. Like, you know, how do you decide under atheism what is good or bad? And I see some of the modern apologists doing this under liberalism. You know, like incest, is it good? Or, you know, how do you? It's very arbitrary. It's very subjective, and there is no basis of objective morality according to people using their own rational senses. So they can never decide what is good or bad if you don't believe in God.
Okay, next, I think Ghada has done a good job with 38, 40, 45. Two small notes. Jinn are made of fire. God seems to have forgotten about that and is putting them in fire. I don't see how that can hurt them. I mean, if God wanted to punish the sons of Adam that way, he would put them in mud, but I guess that doesn't come up. Okay, next, 750.
No, let's not jump all the way down there. Can we go like through 44 all the way down to 50?
Sure.
Because holy crap, sorry if I'm not supposed to say that word.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Because for real, this is the most, I don't know if it's petty or just, really messed up.
Yeah.
Because it talks about a conversation happening between the people of hell and the people of heaven, and the people of heaven be like, hey, did you find what God had in store for you? Because we did. And then it just keeps on talking about how the people of heaven, I don't know if their humanity was stripped out of them, because in heaven you don't, feel sadness or like anything like that. You're just happy in general. So whenever they see what's going on, so when the people of heaven be like, hey, can you please give us a little bit of what you have, just a little bit of water, and the people of heaven be like, no, this is, God forbids us, so we are not going to do it.
Yeah, there is no human compassion in heaven.
No.
It's just,
and like, not only that, like God is saying this as if it's a good thing, and especially after like reading about it in the previous verses, that most of these people are just not disbelievers. They're not necessarily bad people.
How would I even consider something to be good and desirable if it's going to strip me of my compassion? I can't take that. It's just
agree with that.
wrong. It's wrong not to have compassion in heaven. It's wrong when somebody asks you for a cup of water to say, nah, you know what? The landlord said you can't have it, so you can't have it.
And this is not the criteria of any being that really exists. I mean, a being that really exists would not have these type of mandates, right? These exist, these threats and empty promises exist solely because people want to make believe, and they want to share this belief, and so they're going to offer the impossible promise and the threat of fate worse than death for believers or unbelievers. That's it. That's the only reason they exist. All of these verses scream that this was made up by people who want to imagine a fantasy land, and that's all it is. That's the only way I can reasonably interpret this.
Yeah. And I was going to mention that, correctly noted in 745, to not believe is the greatest possible evil you can commit. You're right. That's what the point is. Okay. Where is repetitions and repetitions? Yeah, they're there. I don't know. Like maybe Muhammad likes to repeat himself a lot.
Evidently, yes. We're going to have to skip ahead
there's something in the Arabic adab, in Arabic literature, where they say that repetition, makes, like, the more you repeat something, the better the emphasis. And that's something like when you study the Quran, that's one of the things that they study is the things that are repeated a lot. That means that the things that are repeated, those are the things that are more important. And that's why they also is kind of how interpreted that Moses was one of the most important prophets, because his story in the Quran was repeated many, many times. And the same thing about several others, like the story of Yusuf is also repeated several times in the Quran. And not only that, there was a whole chapter dedicated to that. Same thing with Maryam. Same thing with with certain aspects of the Quran. So it's not necessarily they're just like he likes to repeat himself. It's actually just an additional emphasis on things.
And if I may add, in that repetition, there's always, especially a story of Moses, it adds a little something different, a small little detail. So it's not 100% the same story being told again or the same thing being said again, but you'll notice subtle differences. So it's revealing something in each one of those.
You would wonder why.
Oh, and then in chapter 54, it talks about how Allah created the earths and the heavens in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he sat on his throne.
Okay, so we're going to take that one up in a separate video where we concentrate only on the scientific errors in the Quran.
I really want to come in on that, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So we're all going to do this with you. I think you're going to have fun, Nadir.
Very good. We're going to need
bring more people from your end.
Yeah, we're going to have to close this up in just a few minutes. So I'm sorry that this was such a huge surah and we didn't cover most of it. Most of it was just repetitions of stories that we'd already addressed. So if anybody has a closing comment or anything that they need to address with the remainder of the surah, please do it now.
Well, it seems like, where we're all kind of headed is where really is the evidence for Islam, because I keep pointing to the fact that, hey, this is not just blind faith. This is just not you better believe or else you'll burn. That was more of a Christian message. So I hope that, I can share the message with Ghada, share what our evidence.
My name is Ghada, not Ghada. Ghada.
Oh, Ghada. Okay.
Well, at least he has a chance of being able to pronounce that. I'm American. I'm hopeless.
No, the reason I corrected him is because a lot of Pakistanis and Indians have been making fun of my name because they keep pronouncing it wrong and saying that my name means donkey. And my name does not. My name is Arabic, and it's pronounced Ghada, and it means young woman.
Ghada is donkey.
Yes, I know, which is why I don't like it when people.
So I'm gonna take a stab at this. I'm starting with an R or a G. What am I doing?
It's like Ghada. I'll accept it. I'll accept it.
Well, is Ghada?
It's this. You're saying Gha. It's Gha. It's kind of like an R sound.
It's exactly, Aaron. It's exactly the sound you make when you use.
Or gurgling.
When you're gurgling with your mouth.
Ghada.
Ghada.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll go with that then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ghain, right? Ghain is the letter.
Yes, sir.
So, as I said, just to close out, we have challenged the Islam critics, people like Abdullah Samir, Apostate Prophet, and others in them, and they have looked at our evidence, and because they fear public humiliation because they can't refute it, they all ran away. So this is a challenge, which I will challenge you guys. Maybe at another time we will discuss the evidences for Islam and science.
I kind of want to Google you now.
Is that your pitch, Nadir? Like, I hear that all the time.
Well, that's where my specialty is in Quran and science. And I've carefully Googled and looked at every so-called claim for scientific error or something like that in the Quran, and every one of those are laughable. And when in all my debates, when I do present the scientific evidence, they go unchallenged, and they are not able to produce.
I'm having as hard a time believing that as I am any of the rest of the stuff we read today. But I will agree with you that your explanation of Adam and Eve was laughable. So we can leave it at that.
Well, you got to be a little bit more open-minded, in my opinion, because you really didn't let me explain it well. I think what happened when I tried to explain
we'll get
Adam,
another chance
everybody
because
jumped on
that's going to
me.
be. We can include that in the next episode, which we can have a 2-hour episode if you want, and just deal with the errors.
Scientific errors. I am down for that.
Let's
And
do
by
it.
the way, I want to again thank you, Nadir, for being on. I actually do value. We may disagree, but I value your conduct, and I appreciate your demeanor. And Ghada, if I hope I'm doing that right. Very welcome addition to this panel. Mohsin, thank you for coming back on. Bogi, as always, thank you. If anybody wants to make a closing comment after me, please do.
Well,
Are we ending the surah? Sorry.
I can just say, I haven't read the Quran in a very long time, ever since I came to the US. When I was in Saudi with my family, I read it a lot because that's what we did as a family, even when I was not Muslim. And it was always very intriguing for me to read it after I became I left the religion. So it's like you take off the rose glasses and you start reading it from a different manner. And it's been actually kind of fun. And I've started to read it and kind of look at it as a piece of literature instead of as a piece of holy text. And that has made it a lot more fun to read than when it was a piece of text.
Okay. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so please be quick.
Quick question. Are we going to do a 2-part series on this surah?
We can if you guys want to, but I can't do
We're
it
right
today.
about like halfway through.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm up for it.
All right. Send me email to set a date, and we will do a part 2 if you like. I just can't do it right now.
No, not right now. Like next time, and then we just finish.
You want to do it on Sunday?
Yeah.
Okay. We will schedule the same discussion.
Just a closing comment from me is that I think what happens is when people talk about the science and Quran and stuff, when science goes against the Quran, then they reject the science. When rationality goes against science, they reject rationality and they start saying, like, how do you even make sense of, like, if you can hear things, or how do you trust your senses, and those kind of arguments. And then I think it's a very dishonest pursuit of truth, if you ask me. And that's where I'll leave it at. I mean, we've been told to believe that if anything goes against the Quran, you just simply reject it, whether it's science, rationality, or your own senses even. And I agree that senses could be wrong, your intuitions could be wrong, but we have checks and measures in the scientific method that we can test something. But we're supposed to reject all that, and I think like it's just a dishonest pursuit.
Okay, I'm going to have to close it up. We're running out of time very, very quickly. Thank you very, very, very much. And we'll see you again next week to do part 2 of this. And if anybody has a scheduling issue, send it to me an email. Otherwise, we'll book it for the same time as we did for this one. I'm very much looking forward to that. We'll do the scientific errors in another episode, maybe in the same day. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you much.
Thank you.